They moved down the corridor under cool lights toward the framed doorway. Kang Hyuk walked to the right in a suit and showed faint blue energy. The blue-haired youth stayed close and spoke first, which tightened the room. The blonde companion apologized while the representative remained silent. A suited man was formally presented as Kang Min's older brother, and the name hit the group. Kang Hyuk turned his face and fixed his red eyes on the others. When another man asked what brought him, Kang Hyuk said he was not there to see him. Tension split the room and distance grew between patience and action. They moved down the corridor and halted before the framed doorway under cool lights. The assembled group watched as a suited man had been formally presented as Kang Min's older brother, and murmurs tightened the air. The blue-haired youth stepped forward and demanded proof, pointing and asking if he was really Kang Min's older brother. Kang Hyuk turned his face slowly and fixed his red eyes on the questioner and stayed silent. The blonde companion apologized while the representative remained impassive. Silence settled and distance grew between patience and action as the room braced for what came next. They had moved down the corridor and halted before the framed doorway under cool lights. The assembled group watched as a suited man was formally presented as Kang Min's older brother, and murmurs tightened the air. The blue-haired youth stepped forward and demanded proof, rising to question the claim. Kang Hyuk turned his face slowly and fixed his red eyes on the questioner and remained silent. He then snapped, saying they had heard him already, while his jaw tightened and an inner thought cut through the hush: this bastard. Silence deepened and the room braced. They walked into the long corridor and stopped beneath the cool, overhead circular lights. A suited man had been presented as Kang Min's brother, and murmurs tightened the air. The blue-haired youth stepped forward and demanded proof in a voice that trembled slightly. Kang Hyuk turned his head slowly and fixed his red eyes on the questioner. He held his silence at first, then snapped that they had already heard him. A private verdict formed in his jaw, and the thought remained: this bastard. Someone forced themselves to say no. Calm down, and the room braced with tense quiet. They entered the long corridor and halted beneath the cold circular overhead lights. A suited man had been presented as Kang Min's brother, and murmurs tightened the room. The blue-haired youth stepped forward and demanded proof with a trembling voice. Kang Hyuk turned his head slowly and fixed his red eyes on him. He held his silence, then thought he had no desire to provoke him further. His hand clenched at his side, and the motion warned of latent violence. He reflected that if the man was a regular metahuman, he would shatter skulls. The suited man presented as Kang Min's brother opened the door and invited them in. The room quieted and murmurs tightened when the invitation fell across the group. The blue-haired youth stepped forward and demanded proof with a trembling voice. Kang Hyuk turned his head and fixed his red eyes on him. He kept his silence and had no desire to provoke the man further. His hand clenched at his side, and the motion warned of latent violence. That restraint held the room and tempered any rash movement among them. The man posing as Kang Min's brother opened the door and invited the group inside. Murmurs tightened as the invitation landed across the room. The blue-haired youth demanded proof in a trembling voice. Kang Hyuk turned and fixed his red gaze on the youth. He kept his silence and clenched a fist at his side as a warning. His restraint prevented any rash action and calmed the group. A thought caption declared that returners were all the same. The caption deepened the divide while the two men regarded each other in the doorway. The man who claimed to be Kang Min's brother opened the door and invited them in. The room fell into cautious murmurs that tightened around the doorway slowly. A youth demanded proof in a voice that trembled slightly. Kang Hyuk met the challenge with a fixed red gaze and said nothing. He clenched a fist at his side as a silent warning to them. His restraint held back rash action and quietly calmed the group for now. A thought caption labeled returners all the same and widened the divide. Under pink light and drifting petals, Kang Hyuk stood with two companions. They faced the seated man as the others watched with guarded attention. Kang Hyuk stood beneath pink light and drifting petals as the room watched. The man who claimed to be Kang Min's brother had opened the door and invited them inside. Murmurs tightened around the doorway while a youth demanded proof in a trembling voice. Kang Hyuk met the challenge with a fixed red gaze and said nothing. He kept his fist clenched at his side as a silent warning. His restraint calmed some and restrained rash action. A thought caption labeled them returners all the same and widened the group's divide. He stood flanked by two companions facing the seated man. Kang Hyuk stood beneath drifting petals and faint pink light as the room watched. A youth demanded proof in a trembling voice as murmurs tightened around the doorway. Kang Hyuk met the challenge with a fixed red gaze and said nothing. He kept his fist clenched at his side as a quiet warning that steadied some. Two companions flanked him while the thought caption labeled them returners and widened the divide. Across the room, a red-haired man lounged on the couch and watched with composed interest. Tension hummed under the stillness before any decision was made. Kang Hyuk stood beneath drifting petals and faint pink light as the room watched. A youth demanded proof in a trembling voice while murmurs tightened around the doorway. Kang Hyuk met the challenge with a fixed red gaze and remained silent, his fist clenched as a quiet warning. Two companions flanked him, labeled returners and widening the divide. Figures circled on couches and benches. A blond man began counting, then another man checked a phone. The red-haired man lounged and completed the count. Tension hummed beneath the stillness before any decision was taken. Kang Hyuk stood as voices counted around him. They numbered 4, then 5, then 6, and finally 7. The tally confirmed 7 in total, and the circle tightened. Kang Hyuk's red eye watched in silence. A blond man rose and challenged him, asking about allegiance to NewAgeManhwa. A tense hush followed. A man answered and admitted he worked under NewAgeManhwa, giving his name as O. The room shifted its attention toward Kang Hyuk and waited for his move. Voices finished their count, and the circle tightened around Kang Hyuk. His red eye observed them without expression as a blond man rose to speak. The blonde revealed him as Hunter Kang Min's older brother, and the room erupted. Several men shouted in surprise and demanded NewAgeManhwa's whereabouts. Kang Hyuk remained still and listened as a red-haired man stepped forward with a smirk. The red-haired man asked if he was Kang Min's brother with a sharp grin. Footsteps sounded as the two closed distance, and the room tensed for action. Voices finished their count, and the circle tightened slowly around Kang Hyuk. His red eye watched them without expression as a blond man rose and named him. The man declared him Hunter Kang Min's older brother, and the room erupted in surprise. Several men shouted and demanded to know where NewAgeManhwa was now. Kang Hyuk remained still while a red-haired man stepped forward and asked if he was Kang Min's brother. Footsteps sounded as the two closed distance. The crowd braced and the space tensed for action. Voices had finished counting, and the ring had tightened around Kang Hyuk. His red eye watched without expression as the crowd pressed steadily closer. A red-haired man stepped forward and named him aloud to everyone present. He introduced himself as Gu Changsu and claimed command of the Guard Guild's attack squad. He stated that NewAgeManhwa served within the guild as a hunter. Gu offered a seat and extended his hand slowly toward Kang Hyuk. They shook hands while murmurs rippled through the tense room around them. Gu then ordered drinks and told his men to attend them immediately. After the crowd settled, Gu Changsu moved closer and kept the pressure on Kang Hyuk. He named NewAgeManhwa as a frequent patron and asked why Hyuk sought him. Hyuk replied the matter was personal and refused to elaborate. Gu suggested they head downstairs first and then offered to contact NewAgeManhwa if Hyuk disclosed the reason. Murmurs ran through the room as Gu smiled and extended help, while Hyuk watched him with a guarded, unreadable expression. After the crowd settled, Gu Changsu kept pressure on Kang Hyuk and offered help. A dark voice urged immediate contact with NewAgeManhwa. The red-haired man scowled and suspected someone in the room was a returner. He considered the rumor plausible, but decided not to act on it yet. He smiled and shifted tone to lessen tensions around Hyuk. He admitted contacting NewAgeManhwa would be difficult to arrange directly. He proposed sending his men to trace Kyuho's whereabouts and gather facts. He refused to hand over guild information freely and stressed discretion. He presented his help as conditional while he watched Hayek carefully. Gu Changsu pressed Kang Hayek and framed his assistance as conditional and cautious. A server set bottles on a table while several men lingered nearby. Hayek studied the room for the moment and kept his intentions private. He planned to use their curiosity and resources as pawns to reach Hwang Kyuho. He suspected more hunters were involved and resolved to gather more information first. The red-haired man smiled and called meeting Kang Min's brother in honor while watching Hayek. Gu Changsu watched Hayek closely. Gu Changsu had pressed Kang Hayek and framed his help as conditional and cautious. In the private room, Kang Hayek was asked to tell everything he knew about Hwang Kyuho, and he found the demand annoying. The red-haired man smiled and offered an evasive reply while avoiding specifics. A blonde companion noted that the others had not come. A sudden memory of the dungeon played in Hayek's mind, showing companions falling to monsters and reanimated corpses. Hayek kept his face closed and withheld details. He planned to use their curiosity as a way to reach Hwang Kyuho. Gu Changsu had leaned on Kang Hayek and framed his help as conditional. In the private room, the group demanded what had happened in the dungeon and pressed for details about Hwang Kyuho. Kang Hayek kept his face closed and refused specifics. The red-haired man smiled and dodged direct answers, while a blonde companion noted absences among the others. When Hayek said they had fought the boss, the room erupted in shock and threats. One man warned he would kill a liar. Hayek admitted it was his first time seeing the creature and said the demonic beast was far stronger than expected. Gu Changsu had framed his aid as conditional, and the group gathered in a private room to demand details about the dungeon and Hwang Kyuho. Kang Hayek kept his face closed and refused specifics. When he said they had fought the boss, the room erupted in shock and accusations. He admitted it was his first time seeing the creature and said the demonic beast proved far stronger than they expected. One man leapt to threaten him with death if he lied, while others questioned who had survived and who had died, pressing Hayek for names and proof. The questioning resumed in the private room and tension tightened around Kang Hayek. He stated that Hwang Kyuho had defeated the boss and left first. Kang Hayek said the team was cleaning up when other demonic beasts attacked and several hunters died. A red-haired man seized Kang Hayek by the collar and demanded more, forcing him to repeat the timeline. Another voice called the confrontation a lesson for a newbie and reiterated that Kang Hayek claimed the remaining hunters fell to an ambush after the boss was down. Questioning continued in the private room, with tension concentrated around Kang Hayek. He repeated that Hwang Kyuho had defeated the boss and left first. He said the remaining hunters were cleaning up when other demonic beasts attacked. A red-haired man grabbed his collar and demanded the timeline again. An officially dressed man introduced a special guest and ordered them to behave. The interrogators questioned how the weakest in the team had survived an ambush. Kang Hayek answered briefly and named the person who had saved him. Questioning in the private room tightened around Kang Hayek. When Kang Hayek confirmed the late guildmaster's brother had rescued him, the interrogators reacted with disbelief. Red-haired man pressed for the rescuer's ability. Kang Hayek faltered. He considered whether the brother would disclose his power. He also wondered if permission had been revoked. His doubt showed on his face. After a beat, he refused to elaborate and said he had told everything he knew. The room remained restless as the interrogators absorbed the refusal and recalculated their next move. Kang Hayek sat under the harsh interrogation light and showed obvious nervousness. A single sweat drop tracked from his temple to his lips silently. Red-haired man demanded the rescuer's ability again and pressed with measured questions. Kang Hayek faltered and hesitated before each answer under the persistent scrutiny. He wondered if the brother would reveal his power or if permission had changed. When Kang Hayek refused to say more, the room tightened and waited. The interrogators recalculated their approach, then exchanged low, urgent glances among themselves. Kang Hayek remained under the harsh interrogation light and kept his posture guarded and small. A single sweat drop crossed his temple as the room held its breath. The interrogators pushed once more but met silence. Then Kang Hayek asked if there was more to discuss and spoke plainly. The red-haired man forced a grin, laughed awkwardly, and denied any further business. He rose and prepared to leave, keeping his answers light. The room did not relax. Tension lingered as the team recalculated their next move in low tones. After the red-haired man rose and forced a grin, the room did not relax. An unknown suited man stepped forward under the magenta light. He locked his gaze on the blonde companion. He ordered, "Follow me," and gestured toward the exit. The blonde companion froze, then turned slowly toward the doorway. Background figures stiffened and watched in silence. Kang Hyuk stayed guarded but watched the exchange. The team's calculations continued in low tones behind closed faces. No one offered explanation or relief. After the red-haired man rose and forced a grin, the magenta light held the room in place. The suited man had stepped forward and pointed at the blonde companion, ordering him to follow and motioning toward the exit. The red-haired man moved in and seized the blonde companion by the throat and shoulder. The blonde companion froze and strained against the hold as background figures fell silent and watched. Kang Hyuk stayed guarded and observed every motion. He then spoke with a cold edge, warning that the blonde companion only had to follow him. The red-haired man had risen and forced a grin, while magenta light froze the room. A suited man stepped forward and pointed at the blonde companion toward the exit. The red-haired man then seized the blonde companion by throat and shoulder as onlookers fell silent. Kang Hyuk stayed guarded and watched every motion before issuing a cold warning. In the present panel, the red-haired man scoffed at the insult and defied the threat, ordering the blonde companion released because he had matters to attend. Another voice immediately pressed the issue, asking about how the other hunters had died. The red-haired man seized the blonde companion by the throat and shoulder. Magenta light filled the room and froze motion. Earlier, a suited figure had pointed them toward the exit. Onlookers fell silent at the escalation. Kang Hyuk watched with guarded poise and gave a cold warning. The red-haired man scoffed at the insult and refused the threat. He ordered the blonde companion released and said he had other matters to attend. Another voice pressed the question about the dead hunter's intention, snapped taut. The red-haired man had seized the blonde companion by the throat and shoulder, and magenta light had frozen motion. A suited figure earlier had pointed them toward the exit, and onlookers had fallen silent. Kang Hyuk watched with guarded poise and issued a cold warning that the red-haired man dismissed. He ordered the blonde companion released and said other matters required his attention. Another voice demanded answers about the dead hunters and tension snapped taut. The blonde companion warned someone to return or he would look for their sister. Laughter rose from the seated men when an off-panel voice replied, "I will." After the red-haired man had seized the blonde companion, magenta light settled over the room. A pink door flashed and clicked. Attention shifted toward it. A standing man stormed forward and demanded who allowed anyone to act before a returner. The seated men exchanged bitter explanations and denials about boundaries and responsibilities. Voices circled accusations and warnings while the group pressed the blonde companion about his actions. One man asked plainly what had been written on the note he had given. After the red-haired man had seized the blonde companion and magenta light had settled, the group suddenly focused on a flashing pink door. A standing man advanced and demanded authority, while seated men traded bitter denials about boundaries. The red-haired man then disclosed he had given the returner the incineration plant address while he smoked. Voices rose as others asked if a travel-worn returner had been sent there. A companion mocked that Boss Changnu had arranged the returner's eternal rest. Accusations circled, and the blonde companion faced new pressure over his note. After the magenta light had settled and the pink door drew attention, the room turned to accusation. Men argued about authority and responsibility. The red-haired man admitted he had smoked and given the returner the incineration plant address. Voices rose over the returner's destination and possible fate. A standing man asked if they should inform the others. The red-haired man said returners at the plant would handle him. Someone then asked why the returner had sought Kyuho. The blonde companion stayed under pressure as suspicions circled the group. After the magenta light had settled and the group argued, suspicion centered on the returner. The red-haired man said boys at the plant would find him once he tasted blood. A subordinate asked permission to go watch and held the phone on a call. The blonde companion waited as a boss on the line ordered them back to work. The room quieted into tense agreement while plans sent the returner toward the plant. No one volunteered to inform the others. After the magenta light and the argument, suspicion still circled the returner. The red-haired man took a call while he smoked. He asked where Hwang Kyuho was and questioned whether his squad had arrived. The caller offered to send men and promised fresh girls in exchange. The red-haired man then barked an order and told Hwang to come to his office. Changwoo asked what was happening. Smoke curled between his fingers and the phone. His face stayed unreadable as he gave the instruction. Suspicion still clung to the returner after the magenta light and the earlier argument.